Welcome back to the Kickstarter Weekly, everyone, and if it's your first time here, then welcome. In this week's episode, I'll be looking at campaigns that are completing their funding between December the 5th and the 11th. Before I do that, I'm going to talk about some of the games that I've played since the last video, and at the beginning of that section, I'm going to give a little bit of a preamble about how I'm approaching that section to hopefully streamline it and make it a little bit shorter. But I'll wait until I get into that section to do that. Then I'll talk about the 3 campaigns that are completing their funding this week that I think are sort of the cream of the crop, campaigns that you may want to be aware of if you're not already. And then before I wrap the video, I'll quickly talk about any games that I personally backed from last week's video and any games that I've acquired into my collection. Now, the main reason for those last 2 sections is to give you all an idea of what's eventually coming into my collection and what's just arrived. Because at the end of the year, I'm going to again be producing teach and review videos, but I'm going to be doing it with some new equipment in a new studio space upstairs. Everything's going to look, I think, much better. But I want to make sure that I'm producing that featuring games that are games that you all would like to hear more about, whether that's my personal thoughts on it in the form of a review or just a teach. If it's something that you think you're going to want to play and you want a little help finding your way through the game and learning it. So if any of the games in the sections that I just backed or the sections that have just arrived are games that specifically interest you, let me know in the comments below, and then I can make sure to push them up the queue in the production line. As always, my videos are bookmarked, so if there's a particular campaign that you want to know about or a particular game that you want to hear about, you can just jump to those sections. Also, if you're watching any of the campaigns that I'm talking about and something particularly strikes your interest, you can go down into the details section of the video, and I always have links to those campaigns. So you don't have to go hunting for them, whether they're on Kickstarter, BackerKit, or GameFound. You can just hit the link, you'll be there, then you can look at it for yourself and see if it's something that you want to back. Finally, please like and subscribe. That is the best way to help support the channel at this time. I probably will be launching a Patreon around the end of the year, in January maybe, around the same time that I start producing those teach and review videos and launching a streaming channel to stream games on Twitch. I'll probably also be launching a Patreon around that time, so people who want to help support the channel that way can. But in the meantime, the best way to do it is simply by liking and subscribing and leaving comments. Thank you very much for spending a little time here with me today. Let's get moving and talk about the 10 games that I've played since the last video. Now, I mentioned that I was going to do a little bit of a preamble in this section to talk about how I was streamlining it. In the past, I've been talking about some games multiple times, and I find myself unsure about whether I should be catering the talk to people who are maybe finding the channel for the first time and talking more in depth about the game every time, or not repeating myself and really respecting the people who are watching multiple videos and kind of are here for the long haul. So I think my solution ultimately is going to be that when I talk about a game for the first time, I'm going to let you all know that this is the first video that I'm talking about this game in. And I will go into a little more detail about the game itself and my thoughts. If you don't hear me say that, that means that I've talked about it in previous videos. So if it's a game that is striking your interest for some reason and you want to hear more about it, you can always go back and find the first time that I talked about it. But I'll let you know from now on going forward if it's the first time that I'm talking about it. If I don't say that, you'll know that it's not. That means today I actually have 6 games that I'm talking about for the first time and 4 games that are repeats. In those repeats, I'm just going to briefly mention my newer thoughts about the game, so I'm not going to be repeating myself. I think that's just going to be the best way to respect everyone's time and make it the easiest to use this section to your full advantage. So that said, the first game that I'm talking about today, it is the first time I'm talking about it. It is 7 Wonders Duel. Now, this is a game that I've played in the past. I think a lot of people know 7 Wonders, which is a card drafting game, but it doesn't really play below 3 players. So they made a 2-person variant game, 2-person version. It's called 7 Wonders Duel, and it's just a back and forth between 2 players. The way that they achieved that is they created a tableau, and so players are going to be selecting cards from that tableau. Now, some of the rows in the tableau are face down. So you won't know what those cards are until you take cards in front of them in the tableau and then reveal them. So it creates some amount of mystery, and you can't plan everything perfectly. You can't have perfect strategy because you don't know what cards are going to come up necessarily. Now, I really like the game. I think it's a really, really good game for 2 players. If you like Seven Wonders, or if you like card drafting games or kind of head-to-head games, it's a really good choice. I don't know if I'd put it right at the top of my list with some other 2-player games that I've been playing lately that I really, really like. Those include Wingspan, the new duet version that's available in Wingspan Asia, Curious Cargo, Caper Europe, and Patchwork, which I'm going to talk about later in this video. It'll also be the first time I talk about Patchwork, but I've played it a bunch in the past. So while I really do like Seven Wonders Duel a lot, and I think there's a lot of room for strategy, and it's fairly replayable, it's just not a game that speaks to me quite as much. And I'll only probably be playing it on Board Game Arena. I just don't think it's a game that I'm going to rush out to buy to add to my collection. I also don't think that my wife Kristen, that this is a game that she'd be that interested in. She doesn't really like 2-player head-to-head games. And so that probably is not a really good game for me to have in my collection, as most of my 2-player games end up being games that we play with each other. So it's probably going to be more just a Board Game Arena game for me. Now, my friend that I was playing it with wanted to play both expansions, but I'd only played Seven Wonders Duel once, physically, a few years ago, before the pandemic, and I hadn't played either expansion, so I said, let's back things up, let's play the base game, and then let's play each expansion separately, and then in the future we can kind of play all of it together. So we did do that, and I have ratings, therefore, for the base game and each expansion. The base game, again, I think it's a solid game. I can recognize it as that, and I can play it and have a really good time with good strategy involved. So I feel like it deserves about an 8.0 for me for right now. I don't know if it will go up or down over time. It could go up if I think, the strategy is just that deep and good, but it definitely isn't a game that really kind of hits the sweet spot to me or appeals to me. We then played it with the Pantheon expansion, and that just kind of adds in more cards that give you special powers that you can use. And there are different points in the game when you turn over cards that you then select which of these cards will come into the game, and you are able to slot them in certain places so that the various players have to spend different amounts of money to use them. So for instance, if it's a card that you turn over and it's something you think you really want to play, you'll want to slot it closer to you and make it cheaper for you to trigger later in the game. If it's something that you don't think will be that helpful to you, you'll probably want to slot it away from you, where you'll have to spend a lot of money to play it. That will give your opponent the ability to play it cheaply, but it will also mean that other cards that you turn over later and they turn over will probably have to get slotted closer to you and be cheaper for you. I liked the additional elements that threw into the game, the powers and some of the choices involved, and so I would be consistent with my overall rating for Seven Wonders Duel, and I would also give Pantheon an 8.0. Then we played the expansion Agora with the Senators, and this brings in some area control into the game. There are 6 different little regions with Senators. You're placing cubes to kind of have majority in each of those. When you hold majority in any one of these areas, you get a special power. And if you ever happen to get majority in all 6 areas, you automatically win the game. I didn't like this expansion as much. I think it's something that I would like more if I played Seven Wonders Duel a lot, to the point that I got bored with it. It might be fun to add in this new thing, but I think as someone who would like to play the base game a lot more, this just became an extra thing for me to, have to monitor, I guess. And the other expansion, Pantheon, is something that I thought integrated really well. This one becomes like a whole other system that I have to put a lot of energy in, and it actually pulls me away from the base game to some degree, dealing with this other system of powers, the area majorities in there, kind of keeping track of them, and then being worried that I could possibly, lose majority in everything and just lose the game outright. So for me, I'm going to give Agora a 7.0, lower than the other 2, and I think it's something that over time, if I played Seven Wonders Duel a lot and I got a little bored with it, got a little stale, I decided I wanted to put Agora into the game at that point, my rating for it could go up, because at that point it would be a welcome addition. I think for me anyway, I really just want to play the base game for a while, and this just became kind of too much extra stuff that I don't want to have to deal with. I do see the value of it, and like I said, I think that if you play the base game a lot, it gets stale. It could be of value to you, but I think if you're like me, where you're playing Seven Wonders Duel, the base game for the first time, you might want to stay away from Agora for a while. So 8.0, 8.0, and 7.0 for Seven Wonders Duel, the base game, and the 2 expansions. Next on the list is Caper Europe. This is a game that I have talked about before, so I won't go into great detail about it. It's a 2-player game though, and it's kind of a head-to-head card game, and I just continue to really love it. Also, I don't think I've talked about the physical production, which is what I have because I did Kickstart it. It is so well designed. The card quality, just the production, the little game trays system that they have for it. It is such a good game that can be played quickly and set up quickly and offers good strategic decisions. It is a card drafting game. It uses area majority in 3 different locations. There's some variability to that from game to game. I just really like this one, and I think it's so good for what it is. And it plays, let's say 20 minutes, 30 minutes tops. And in that time frame, it's got lots of good choices, and it's easy to set up and pretty easy to teach and explain. So this is a really good go-to 2-player game for me. I think in general, I prefer this one to Seven Wonders Duel. There may be more long-term strategy in Seven Wonders Duel. You may get more mileage out of Seven Wonders Duel in the long run, especially with the fact that it has those 2 expansions, certainly with those. But just for a good 2-player head-to-head game that I think offers good choices and plays quickly, and you can kind of keep coming back to, and is very portable. It's something that you can take when you travel and play on a smaller surface. I think it's aces. So for me, Caper Europe continues to be an 8.5. Now I played Cascadia for the first time this period. This is from Randy Flynn. He's the designer. It's also published by Flat Out Games, who have a really good string of games recently. They also put out Calico and Verdant. I have both of those. I've played Verdant, which I also think is excellent. I'm looking forward to probably playing Calico this week. And right now they have Fit to Print on Kickstarter. I'm looking at backing that. We'll talk about later because it is one of the 3 featured games in the currently running Kickstarter section. My only caveat with that one, Fit to Print, is that it is a real-time game, and I'm not a huge fan of real-time games, although I've heard this is a good one for people who don't like real-time games. So, cool. I will say, though, that Flat Out Games is just, every single game that I've played of theirs is really a solid hit. So I do have a lot of confidence in them as a publisher. Now, Cascadia is very simple in its design. You start with a starting tile that has 3 different hexes on it, and the hexes have different kind of terrain. Usually one hex has at least 2 kinds of terrain on it. And you're going to put some hexes out, and you're going to put some of these tokens out, these animal tokens. And then on your turn, you need to pick a pair, tile and token, and then place them in your growing tableau of tiles. Now, at the end of the game, you're going to score your longest kind of run for each type of terrain. So you're going to want to be building long stretches of your terrain types. And then on each tile, there's 1, sometimes 2, sometimes 3 icons for the tokens. And so you'll need to place a token on that tile that matches that icon. If you ever get to a point where you have a token that you can't place on any of your tiles because none of your tiles have that icon, you have to just discard the token. So you're going to be wanting to choose the right tiles and tokens. And then within that, there are 5 different kinds of animals in the game. They are what are featured on the tokens, and you have random scoring goals for each of those animals. You'll be picking them randomly every game, and they'll score differently depending on the cards that come out. So you're doing 2 things. You're trying to build large swaths of terrain type, but you're also trying to fulfill the various goal scoring rules for the various animals that you're placing out using the tokens. It's very, very simple in its design, and it's easy to teach, very easy to play, but I think there are so many good choices in this game. It's just this really good, tight little puzzle. It's something that I would recommend to almost anyone. Kristen didn't like it too much because she thought there were too many scoring goals. she doesn't really like a lot of different scoring goals. So if you're in that same boat with her where you want to just have to manage, a couple systems, this may not be your cup of tea. But for people who enjoy that or don't mind that, the fact that you're going to be simultaneously dealing with building, all 5 or 6 terrain types and satisfying the different score conditions for 5 different types of animals. And, you can't do everything. You can do everything maybe a little bit, but you're probably going to want to focus on certain things and do a lot of 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 things during a game, and then the best you can with some of the others. But you won't be able to maximize everything. You will have to make choices, and those choices will generally come from the tiles and the tokens that you get early on the game, the placement that you do, and kind of what leads into what. You'll kind of maximize what's working and build off of that. And I like games where you're kind of dealing with an evolving engine, so your strategy is somewhat determined by that. And I don't mind, or I like games where you're dealing with a lot of different things, so that doesn't really matter to me. So I like the game a lot, but I just wanted to put that one caveat out there where if you're someone who gets, a little anxious by having too many things to deal with, too many things to think about, that's the only time that I would say maybe this isn't a game for you. Otherwise, I think it's a really good little tight puzzle game, and it's something that I would like to keep coming back to again and again. And I think from what I've seen so far, there is a lot of replay in it. So for now, I am rating Cascadia an 8.5. Now, also, for the first time, me talking about it is the Isle of Cats. However, Cascadia was something I played for the first time. Isle of Cats is something I've played quite a few times in the past. So this is something that I have more experience with. Now, I played it this time on Board Game Arena with a friend, and if you're not familiar with Isle of Cats, it combines tile placement and card drafting. So the idea, the theme behind the game here is that you are trying to rescue cats from this island that is very populated with cats before this evil guy, I think his name is Vesh, arrives. And he's on a boat. It's coming. You've got, I think, 6 or 7 rounds to pile these cats into your boat before you need to take off. And you're going to be doing some card drafting at the top of every round. You'll be choosing between these different cards that allow you to rescue cats during that round, and endgame goal scoring cards. And then also some other cards that give you little one-time abilities. And so you'll be selecting between those cards every round. You'll have a basket that you start with. You'll always need a basket to take cats. So later in the round, once you've kind of assembled your cats, you'll put together the various baskets, the one you start with, and then any baskets that you've drafted from cards, and you'll be able to take that many cats during the round. Now, you'll also have to pay fishes to take cats. Cats on the left half of the tile supply cost 3 fishes. Cats on the right half cost 5. And once you kind of choose the drafting cards, you'll then make kind of a final selection of which ones you want to actually use for the round, and you'll need to pay for them in fish. Now, you'll get 20 fish at the top of every round. So let's say you were to take 4 cats, and you took 1 from each side. So that would be 6 fish on one side, 10 fish on the other. That's 16 fish. That would only leave you 4 fish to pay for your cards, which is not enough. So maybe you only take 3 cats during the round, and maybe you're going to try to get 2 of those cats from the side that cost 3 fish. So now you've got 6 fish that you're spending on that side, maybe 5 fish for the one on the other side, so that's 11 fish. That gives you 9 fish to then pay for your cards that round. But you're always going to have to play that decision game. How are you splitting up your fish? Sometimes you'll have fish saved over from previous rounds. Sometimes you'll get abilities that will allow you to get more fish. There are also these special cats that you don't need to pay fish to take, but you need to spend a lot of fish to get those cards. For me, there's a really nice balance here between card drafting and between the tile placement. Now, when you get to the tile placement, there's a whole other level of puzzle that comes into the game because your ship is divided into sections. I think it's 6, maybe 7 sections on the boat. And if you cover a section completely, you won't lose points at the end of the game. But if there are ever any little areas, any squares missing from an area of the boat, I think you lose 2 points at the end of the game for every section that's left uncovered. Now, it's almost impossible to cover the entire boat. You would need to get very lucky and be very skillful to cover everything. So again, you're sort of playing this game of which section of the boat do I want to leave uncovered? And if you figure that out early on, you can just leave that section fully uncovered and then hopefully fill up everything else on the boat. In addition to that, there are these little map icons in different areas of the boat, one for each kind of cat. I believe there are 5 different types of cats in the game. So if you ever place a cat tile that you're placing over one of these map icons and the colors match, you'll immediately get to take a treasure token and place that on your board. And treasure tokens are usually between 1, 2, 3, I think, for the normal treasures tiles. So this is a really good way that you can fill in any gaps if you've had to place cats in such a way where you've left some holes. You can literally use the treasure to fill the holes. Now, all these things working together, I think, makes for a really compelling game. And to me, this is another game where if you are a heavier gamer, there's still enough going on in this game and a lot of really good choices for you to be making to keep you really involved in the game. Yet, the concepts here are not so difficult to understand. There's not so much going on that a lighter gamer is going to have problems understanding it or picking it up. Maybe on a first play, maybe you need to play it through once just to see how everything kind of works together. But in general, the kind of concepts happening here are things I think most people can pick up on pretty quickly. So it's a really good game, I think, that everyone can be happy with and everyone can be engaged with. And also, I think it's a really good combination of card drafting and tile placement, and a really good way to teach either or both of those mechanics, because I wouldn't call this a gateway game. There's enough happening that I wouldn't use it as a gateway game, but as a next step game, I think it serves a lot of purposes. It's a game of cats that wears a lot of hats. And also, I think the name Isle of Cats is something that people come to discover over time. They play it, they say it, and they realize that it sounds like I love cats, which I'm sure Frank West, the designer, loves cats. He must have if he made this game. This is a game full of love for cats, to the point that when you unbox it and you turn the lid over, the inside box has a target and it says place cat here. And I think anyone who has a cat knows that they love empty boxes, and they're going to go and sit in that empty box if you leave it on the table. So there's a lot of love for cats in this game, and it is such a fun, compelling, joyful game to play. It's something that I recommend to almost anyone, unless, again, there's kind of too many things happening for them, or if for some reason they really don't like tile placement games, or they really don't like card drafting games. But I think this does both of those things really well, and it combines them really well for a very compelling overall game. So for me, Isle of Cats comes in at an 8.5. And from there, we move to Lost Ruins of Arnak. This is a game that I have talked about more recently, so I'm going to talk about it a lot less here. I did do a tournament for Lost Ruins of Arnak on Board Game Arena recently, so I played a lot of Lost Ruins of Arnak. And I think I got pretty good at it, pretty good at learning what the ideal opening moves are and things that you can do later in the game. In fact, last video, I mentioned a couple things that I think are really good sort of pro tips for anyone who wants to get better at the game. So I won't repeat myself here, but if you are liking Lost Ruins of Arnak and you want a little strategic help, I'd recommend going and checking out that video. It has, I think, 2 different things in it that are very helpful, or were for me anyway. When you take everything into consideration with Lost Ruins of Arnak, just the variability in the game, the way the cards come out, the fact that you've got another side on the board, the Snake Temple, which gives you a different track that goes up the, I guess for you guys it's this side, track that goes up the right side of the board. There's a lot of variability in this game. And even though I've played it a lot recently and I've seen some things repeat, which makes me think of something like Stone Age, which I played on Board Game Arena a lot when there weren't as many games on Board Game Arena, and that game got very repetitive very quickly. So I saw a little bit of that possible for Lost Ruins of Arnak, but there is so much in the game, I think, that keeps that from happening. And I suppose if you were to play any game enough, it would start to get a little repetitive and stale. But I think there's a lot in Lost Ruins of Arnak that safeguards against that. And overall, I just think it is a fantastic combination of deck building and worker placement. There's an expansion that just came out. I've played it once. I really like it. I think it elevates it completely. It gives you variable player powers, and every character plays differently. Every character is going to give you a different way to tweak your gameplay style. And I know there is a second expansion on the way. I think my ratings of those expansions will make my overall score of the game go up because they are so good. But I think the base game in and of itself is very, very good. So much so that I've been rating Lost Ruins of Arnak for a while an 8.5. I think I'm going to increase my rating to a 9.0, and that probably is where it will sit. I anticipate that the ratings for the expansions will be that level or higher. I think for me, the only time I don't really want to play Lost Ruins of Arnak, I tend to favor heavier games, and it is more of kind of a medium weight game. So sometimes if I want something that has a little bit more crunch to it, I might go for something else. But it's such a good medium weight game with such good choices. And something else that you find out about in Lost Ruins of Arnak is that there is crunch, some fairly significant crunch that comes into the game based on the kind of engine that you build while playing it. It sort of determines the things that you can do. And as you're trying to go up these tracks on the right side of the board, there is a lot of kind of crunch and heavy decisions to be made in terms of how you do that. So it's not the game itself that is complex or hard to understand, but the choices in the game can get complex, especially if you play it really well and do a lot of kind of high-level things to maximize your strategy. The game can get crunchier than you might think it would be from a first look. Yet it's still pretty easy to understand, pretty easy to teach, and I think it's a good kind of next level game for gamers looking for something more. I don't think it's too difficult to pick up for someone who's played some games before. And it's such a good deck building game. It's such a good worker placement game. When it came out, it was compared to Dune Imperium a lot just because they were both deck building and worker placement games. I love them both. I think they're very, very good games. The more I play Lost Ruins of Arnak, the more I think it's the better game. And that's not a knock on Dune Imperium because I have all the expansions for that. I really like that game. I want to play that game a lot more too. They do play very differently, so I think the comparison is a little bit unfair. Lost Ruins of Arnak is more of a victory point race, and it has kind of a competition, literally like a military battle at the end of every round. And that's not something that you're dealing with Lost Ruins of Arnak. So the games, even though they both feature deck building and worker placement, they're kind of fundamentally different and they play differently. So the comparison's kind of unfair, but I'm just riding it since it's been a comparison that's made in the past to say, I think between the two games, I actually do like Lost Ruins of Arnak more, and I'm rating it a 9.0. Oh, and for the record, I played it 5 times this period. I played a game called Lost Seas twice. Now, this is the first time that I'm talking about this one, and I played it, I believe it's an alpha, maybe on Board Game Arena right now. So I played a digital version of it on Board Game Arena, not a physical copy of the game. This I liked because I have a puzzly brain. I'd almost think of it more as a puzzle than a game. But what you're doing is, at the start of the game, you're choosing, well, you've got 4 different random tiles, and you're choosing the fronts or backs of those tiles. They're scoring tiles. And so they're going to determine how you score a column that you end up building, 4 different columns over the course of the game. Then you'll get 4 random tiles kind of going down the side, and you'll have to choose those, and they will determine how you're going to score rows that go across. And so over the course of the game, you'll be building a 16-tile grid, doing some tile drafting from tiles that come out, and they all have different icons related to the ocean on them. Things like palm trees on little floating desert islands, whirlpools, giant rocks coming up out of the ocean, squid, just a bunch of different iconography. And so how you draft is going to depend on the various, the 8 scoring tiles, the 4 for each column and the 4 for each row. And, a lot of times when you're placing tiles, you're going to be looking at the scoring goals for that row and that column. And it requires a little bit of luck because it depends what tiles come out. But you also have to make decisions in terms of what you're putting where, what you can maybe leave till later, where you have a little room to wiggle and where you don't. And I like the puzzly aspect of it. It's a game that I think I would come back to from time to time, and I do enjoy it. It kind of meshes well with my brain. But even though my brain interprets these games well and plays these kinds of games well, it's not necessarily what I'm looking for a board game, so it's not really my game. Even though I enjoy it, and I play it pretty well, and I do pretty well. I think I won both of the two games. I also tend to do really well in auction bidding games, and I don't really enjoy those. So I think maybe my brain just processes those kinds of games at a high enough level that I usually win and do well, but it's also not a super fun experience for me. It's weird. So it is a game that I come back to. I would play it again. It's not a game that I probably buy. It's a little too simple just in its overall design, but if you like that kind of puzzly game, if you like tile placement, if you like going for these multiple scoring things at once, this could be a game that you'd love. I mean, this could easily be a game that's a 9 or a 10 for somebody, and it's going to be really easy to teach and quick to play. Probably it travels well, I'm thinking, although there is a lot of tiles and you are building these 16 tile grids, so it just depends on table space. But tiles, if you're playing outside, tiles are much easier to work with than cards. They don't blow away. So if you're looking for kind of outdoor games, this is probably a good one. The wind's not going to come and blow your tiles away. So I'm rating Lost Seas a 7.0, but keep in mind that has somewhat to do with my own personal opinions, and I think someone who really likes this type of game, their score is going to be really high. They could easily be in the 9s for this. Now, next I'm going to talk about a game called Paint the Roses, which I played a bunch of plays on Board Game Arena a while back, a few weeks ago. And I had said the last time I talked about it, which I think was 2 videos ago, I said that we discovered some things about the game that made it much better, and I would talk about that in the next video. And then I forgot to talk about it last video, so I'm talking about it now. Here's what we discovered. Well, here's the original problem. So Paint the Roses has players doing some tile drafting and tile placement, and it's largely a deduction game. So as you're placing tiles, you are trying to communicate to the other players what card that you have. Now, depending on whether you take an easy, medium, or high difficulty card, there are going to be limitations on that. But the cards are going to have some combination of colored flower and a shape of a hedge. So like the easy card might only have, let's say, hedges and hedges, whereas the medium card might only have hedges and hedges or flowers and flowers. But the high level cards are going to have any combination of flowers and hedges together. And so when you place your own tile out, you are trying to communicate you need something on the tile you're placed and then something on the tiles surrounding it. So like, let's say for instance that my card had, let's say I was doing a high level one, right? And my card had a yellow flower and a heart-shaped hedge. Oh, also this game is themed around Alice in Wonderland. So the idea here is that you are gardeners in the royal court who are trying to fill all the tiles out before the Queen's woodsman comes and chops off your head. And the Queen's woodsman is kind of chasing behind you on a victory point track. And the more you successfully match things, the more points you'll get on this victory point track. But if you have instances where you guess incorrectly, the woodsman will catch up to you fairly quickly. The woodsman's going to be running after you even when you're guessing correctly. So when you guess incorrectly, the woodsman really starts to catch you. And that was our problem early on, is that even when we played everything correctly and had made no mistakes, that woodsman was getting very, very close to us and almost always catching us. Now, I'll come back to this in just a second, but let me finish with what I was saying about the tile placement. So if I place, let's say, something that has a yellow flower on it and let's say a diamond hedge, okay, and the card that I have that I'm trying to communicate to my players has a yellow flower and a heart-shaped hedge. Now, the way the matches works is that the yellow flower is one match. So that would count for a match, and then I would look around it and I would need to find any heart-shaped hedges around it. So if there were, let's say, 2 different heart-shaped hedges, then that counts as 2 matches. Now, if the card that I placed also had a heart-shaped hedge on it and there were yellow flowers around me, that would create more matches. So I probably don't want to do that. I want to place a different hedge, so I only have one set of variables. And so if I get 2 cubes placed on there to show that this thing kind of matches my card in 2 different ways, it's up to everybody else to kind of look around and figure out how. So one thing that I want to make sure that I don't do is place it where, let's say there's 2 heart-shaped hedges so that it matches my card, and then 2 of a different shaped hedges, because they won't know which my card is. They'll have multiple possible solutions, and you want to narrow down the solutions as much as possible. Sometimes if you're doing hard cards, it may take a few turns to do that, and while you're doing that, you start the game with a few passes where the queen won't run quickly because it's not considered an incorrect guess, but if you guess incorrectly, she will catch you very quickly, and you only have 3 passes in an entire game. So what we found was happening was, if we didn't play any high level cards at all, we wouldn't get enough rewards in movement points to stay ahead of the queen. But if we took high level cards, then we would make mistakes inevitably because there were too many variables. You couldn't narrow down the solution quickly enough. And so you would inevitably have to guess, and some of the time you're gonna guess wrong, and so she would catch you. So what we later discovered, which was not originally evident in the UI design of this game, it may be very evident in the rules if you buy a physical copy of the game, but I'm kind of saying this for people who find this game on Board Game Arena and also don't realize this at the outset, you can do multiple guesses on one turn. So my partner can be placing a tile to give me a clue, and I can guess, at what their card is, but then after that happens, she can also guess at what my card is. So she may be placing something that not only helps me out, but at the same time helps her narrow down her choices. And the moment that happens, the moment that is a possibility in the game where you can have 2 successes in one turn, and it cuts in half the amount of running after you the woodsman is doing, it makes the game not impossible, and because of that, pleasurable. And I think the game is inherently very, very fun. It is a great little take on the deduction game. It's the theme behind it. The Alice in Wonderland theme is really fun. And I think there's a lot going for this game. Now, all of that said, it's still not really my game. This is kind of a puzzly type thing that I would come back to, over time, now and again, and have fun with. But this isn't really what I want from a board game. So even though my score is now going up and I'm going to rate it a 6.0, I think before I had it in the 4s or the 5s, I'm going to rate it a 6.0, which to me means it's a game that I still enjoy. Anything a 6 and above is something that I can play and be happy with. It just might not be something that I would choose, because there are so many good games out there, and there are games that much more appeal to me and give me the experience that I want. So it's not necessarily the game that I would choose to play, but if I play it, I'm going to enjoy it for that time period that I'm playing it. So it's a 6.0 score for me. But again, if this is something that sounds appealing to you, you may rate it much higher. This could be a 9 game for you if this kind of hits your sweet spot. So I think now that I have a better understanding of the rules and the UI on Board Game Arena has been somewhat clarified, I would recommend it to people who like it. And I can give it a score that is, I think, acceptable and not punishing to the game. I'm not giving it a score where I'm saying this game is kind of broken, stay away from it. I'm saying this game is good for what it is. It's actually really good for what it is. And if it's the kind of game that appeals to you, I think you're really going to like it. I certainly think in the deduction genre, it does things differently than other deduction games that set it apart. I would much rather play this than something like Fury of Dracula or Whitehall Mystery, games where I feel like you're doing a lot of hunting and pecking and going around the board trying to find an entity that's moving. To me, this is it's a little more puzzly. There are more choices involved, strategic choices, and it's inherently kind of a fun, joyful game to play. And the theme also makes it fun. So if you like this kind of thing, definitely check out this game. It's going to get a 6.0 for me. Next on my list is a game called Potion Explosion. This is the first time that I'm talking about it. It's not the first time that I've played it. This is a game that is great to play physically because you've got this whole machine of marbles, these marbles coming down these sliders. And the way gameplay works is you're going to, on your turn, remove a marble, and then the marbles that collide together if they are the same color, you will also get those marbles. And sometimes, you'll pull those marbles out. And then if the marbles on the other side of that group of marbles collides together, you'll also get that. So you can get all these chaining marbles. Now, you're going to take the marbles. You're going to be working on potions at any time, 2 potions. So you can immediately just take any marbles that you get and put them in your potions in sections of those potions that match in color. And then you have a little decanter that can carry up to 3 different marbles over to the next round. So it allows you to have a little extra spillage. If you have more marbles than that, they'll kind of go back into the marble machine bank and they'll get distributed back into the rows. But what you're trying to do is complete potions. Anytime you complete 3 of the same type of potion, you'll get a special scoring token. And anytime you complete 5 different types of potions, you'll get a special scoring token. And then once these scoring tokens have been taken, the game will complete that round and it will end. So it's a little bit of a race. You're trying to complete these potions. What makes the game even more special beyond the whole marble thing, which is awesome, and I played it recently on Board Game Arena, and it's still really fun there, but it's much more fun to play physically in person, which I've done that too, because you're physically taking out the marbles, and it's very tactile, and it's very fun. It's one of the most fun games I've ever played. But in addition to the whole marble thing, when you complete a potion, you'll get that potion in your inventory, and different potions have different abilities. And so every potion can be used once for their ability. When you do, you'll flip it over just so that you've done it. And they will do you things that allow you to get more marbles or get different marbles. Sometimes it'll allow you to take, let's say, as many marbles as you can from the bottom of all the columns that are different colors. So you may be able to take 2 or 3 or 4 different marbles depending on how many different colors are sitting at the bottom of the columns. One potion might allow you to just take any marble you want from anywhere. Another potion might allow you to take a range of marbles from somewhere. But they're all things that you can use to help you finish your other potions. It's not a complicated game. It's a very fun game, and it's a very fun game to play tactily, and it's a joy. Like, this is a game that I'm never going to go to this one when I'm looking for high strategy, although there is strategy involved in it. But it is a game that is just so fun to play. It plays fairly quickly. The games aren't that long. And it's easy to teach. And I think it's something that appeals to most people. Most people really like this tactile nature of it. I think Gizmos does something a little bit similar with some of the marbles in that game, but it's not the same thing. Both games are very fun. They do play very differently, but they're both these kind of tactile games that involved physical things that you're taking. So for me, Potion Explosion is going to come in with a score of 7.5. From there, I moved to Wingspan. This is a game that I've talked about quite a bit lately in previous videos, so I won't talk about it too much. So I played Wingspan a couple more times since the last time I've talked about it. This is just a game that I continue to really enjoy. This and Lost Ruins of Arnak are games that I've played a lot of lately, and I think when you play a lot of something, you have a much better understanding if this is a game that can really go the distance. Some games you play, it takes you a couple plays to kind of get your head around it and get a really good hold on the game. Then you play it a few more times and then you think, maybe this really isn't the game for me. Like, even though I can see what's good about it and I enjoy playing it, it's just not hitting that sweet spot for me for whatever reason. And I think this is something that I say a lot. If you enjoy the central loop of a game, the gameplay loop, the thing that you're going to be doing over and over again, if you enjoy that so that it doesn't get stale for you when you're doing it over and over and over, that's a game that's going to probably be an evergreen for you. That's going to be a game that you're going to want to keep coming back to because you're not going to get tired of it. Yeah, if you play it hundreds of times, eventually at some point you'll run it into the ground, at least for a while. But those games are really going to have legs, which is interesting because I'm talking about a game with wings. And for me, Wingspan really does have wings. There is a little bit of luck in the game, I guess, or probability that can kind of go against you. I've been in situations where I've played it where you really need certain kinds of cards. and you spend too many turns drawing cards, trying to get the right cards, and you just never even get them, and then you have all these wasted actions. So that can be a possibility in the game, but there are ways to work around it, and I don't mind it happening occasionally in a game of Wingspan because I enjoy the game so much, and it's just so inherently fun to play. Wingspan, I think most people have played it by now, but if you haven't, you shouldn't feel bad about it. No one's going to get the chance to play everything. It's a card-playing game, and it's kind of a tableau-building game, and you've got 3 different rows that you're building of birds, and as you build these various rows, you're going to get more powerful abilities that you can use those rows for, which are drawing more bird cards that you'll be able to play later, gaining food that you'll need to spend when you play a specific kind of bird, or laying eggs on cards that then allow you to play birds, because you'll also need to spend eggs when you play your birds. And then you'll be pursuing various gold cards that you get for certain types of birds, various things, for endgame, and there'll also be different scoring things that happen at the end of every round. So each round you're going to have something that you're competing against the other players with, trying to do the best. And there are 2 different goal scoring cards. You can use one that's kind of very competitive, where whoever does it the best is going to score, and then the other players just get shut out more and more. Or you can play it just in terms of like how many times you score something. But there's so much variability in this between all of the bird cards and the goals scoring at the end of each round and the different goals that you have for the end of the game. I always find myself playing this game, having a lot of fun, trying to make good decisions. Sometimes, with my bird engine that I've been building and the various bird powers, trying to, eke out certain things that I need to do and figure out a way to get that done. And I always enjoy those kinds of decision-making processes in games. So both Lost Ruins and Wingspan are games that I've now played quite a bit lately, and I feel, very confident will stay, because I do own both physically. I feel very confident will both stay in my collection forever, pretty much. There are also some expansions for Wingspan. There's now 3 different expansions. One just added more cards. One added some new player boards and a new resource type. And then the most recent one added a version that you can play with a lot of players and a way to kind of do simultaneous turns. If you've ever played Eclipse, Dawn of the Galaxy, they have a mode in that game when you're playing with like 7 to 9 players where you can take simultaneous turns. And they also have a mode in that new expansion, Wingspan Asia. It's a 2-player head-to-head mode. And I talked about that last video. And I really like that. I think that's the way to play the game for 2 players. Because 2 players, if you're just playing regular Wingspan with 2 players, there's not always enough interplay between what you're doing. A lot of the joy in Wingspan, I think, is when you do things that allow other players to get more food or lay more eggs, or there are different bird powers that play off of other players. And when you're playing with just 2 players, you don't get as much of that. So it feels a little more hamstrung. Whereas if you play this new duet mode that you can get through Wingspan Asia, and if you buy Wingspan Asia alone, I don't believe you even need the Wingspan base game to play it. I think you have everything you need in that expansion to play duet mode by itself. So it plays really well with 2 players. It gives you scoring goals that are based on kind of the birds you've been playing. It does kind of an area majority thing. It just gives you more things to think about, and that replaces some of the things that you won't have going on in a 2-player Wingspan base game that's hobbled a little bit by a low player count. So what I'm talking about specifically in the score right now is for the Wingspan base game. But overall, I like all of Wingspan, and I just wanted to also put it out there that if you are playing Wingspan primarily with 2 players, check out Wingspan Asia. I don't believe you even need the base game to have it. That's definitely the way to play it with 2 players. But for Wingspan, the base game, I'm giving it an 8.5, and I think that's consistent with what I've done up to now. I could see myself eventually raising it to a 9.0, just like with Lost Ruins of Arnak. And I think with either one of these games, if you're someone that really appeals to these kinds of games, your score could easily be a 9 or a 10. I think for both of them, even though the strategy is so good and the choices are so good, I ultimately want something a little bit more complex for me. But I can't deny how good these games are and how good the puzzle of these games are and how enticing the decisions are that you're making while you're playing them. So 8.5 for me for Wingspan base game for now. And I think the one thing that's stopping me from raising it to a 9.0, just like Lost Ruins of Arnak, the way I just did with that one, is the fact that you can sometimes get caught in this bad loop where you're not getting the cards that you need. So I think if that wasn't an issue, Wingspan would be up there at a 9 for me easily. It's something that I may decide isn't as big of an issue later on, and if that happens, I'll probably increase the score. But for me, that's the thing that's keeping it at an 8.5. The last game on the list is something that I've played a few times in the past. I have not talked about it recently. It's called Unsettled. It's a space-themed cooperative game put out by Orange Nebula, who first made a game called Vindication. I think it is a better game than Vindication. It is a very tricky, complex, cooperative game. So think something like Forbidden Island, but the version for heavy gamers. And it's also very thematic. So and it's also got a system that is super compelling. So it's got these different game trays that work really well in terms of getting the game out on the table very quickly. And you've got various resources and things, mechanics that you're going to be using in any game that you play. But in the first Kickstarter, they had 6 different planet boxes. And they've, I think, run another Kickstarter since with more boxes. And the way this works is that each box is themed around a different planet. And so it's going to be different. And the box that they advise starting with is a planet called Winora that has these spore clouds on it. And so as you're going around, you may get afflicted by these spore clouds. They could cause you hallucinations, but they definitely change the feel of the game, the theme of the game, because you're on this spore-filled planet. Another planet may be an ice planet. And so not only does it change the theme, though, the card sets are going to be different for every planet. The puzzles are going to be different for every planet. And in each planet box, you get 3 different series of missions. And so I've played the first series of missions a few different times for Winora. I've never beat it. It's very, very difficult until this past play. I played it with a friend that I grew up with, so I think he and I just have very good communication. We very much respect each other, so we're able to, make decisions together and advise each other without ever strong-arming each other or stepping on each other's toes. We just have a very good sense of collaboration, and no one's an armchair quarterback. So we work well together. And I had played the series of missions before. I had some idea of what was coming, but honestly, it had been so long that I didn't really remember how those mechanics worked. And it wouldn't have helped us. We did get lucky in some ways, which I think helped us, complete the mission. But there are also things that we did that were unlucky that managed to not defeat us. But how it works is that you're going to have a series of kind of these mission cards. And I believe if the other missions work the same way, you'll have 3 kind of tasks in each set of mission cards. And so when you're starting out, you'll land on this planet. You'll have these miniature figures, and you're going to be walking around this planet. You're going to have a player board with different actions on it. And you're going to have these dice, which you never roll. They're just used as counters. And so if you play the default setting, I think you set each counter at 2. And then for most actions, if you take an action, as you take that action, you're going to decrease the counter to 1. When you do a rest action, which you'll have to do every turn with one of your 3 dice, that die will notch up. So that would, from a 2, it would become a 3. However, 2 dice are notching down, 1 dice is notching up. So over time, you're going to be getting a net loss in your counters. So you're going to have to find other ways to get more counters, because anytime they go down all the way to 0, they're at a time, like the little hourglass figure. And if you ever use the die with an hourglass on it, you're going to start to move along this hourglass track, which is going to happen once at the end of every turn anyway. And every time that hourglass gets to the end of the track, both players lose endurance or health. And each player starts out with an endurance track. If that endurance track ever gets down to the bottom, they're basically unconscious for the rest of the game unless you figure out some way to make them conscious again. But if it happens to all players, you're going to lose the game. So it's kind of a slow timer. It limits the numbers of turns that you have in the game. But if you don't do a good job of managing those dice and finding ways to notch them up, you're going to run out of time even more quickly. And those player boards that have 6 different actions on them, they comprise things like moving around the board. Sometimes you can even move around carrying your other players, which can be important, certainly on a planet like Winora, because when you leave an area, you're going to kick up a spore cloud behind you. And the spore cloud is going to make a player take on a distress card. And the distress card will go over one of the player's 6 actions, and it will make them unable to take an action. It's not a big deal when you only have one of them because you can move them around. But if you get a few of them, it's going to significantly hamper what you can do. So sometimes on the planet of Winora, you're going to want to give each other piggyback rides. And it's going to help no player getting left behind to breathe in the spore clouds that are left behind. You also have things where you can kind of discover things that are happening in a tile, like with the local flora or fauna, that will give you new dice place spaces that you can interact with. Sometimes if you do that, you'll get a tile that you can then use to trigger additional powers. Also, you're going to be doing things to raise these little trackers on the board, and every time you do that, you're going to gain a different kind of comprehension. Now, you're going to need certain kinds of comprehensions to build structures that you'll need around the board that will also do things for you. But every time you get one of these comprehensions, you'll get another card in that color that will give you additional powers. There's also these little data cubes on the board that you'll be dredging up, and materials, and you can gather materials, but you'll need your bot, Luna, who floats around the board to gather the data. Now, there's a lot going on in terms of what I'm talking about with all of these mechanisms. And yeah, I think it can be a little bit too grok when you're just learning the game. But it's such a good combination of mechanisms, and it makes for such interesting puzzles that are very variable. Every time you play it, cards are going to come out in different orders, the land cards, and all of the different things that come out, all the different powers, and the different things that you interact with, everything's going to be different. So the puzzle is different. You can play the same mission over and over, and it will be different every time you play it. And certainly, if you're playing it with different people, the way that they choose to do things and interact with things is going to change the game and change the puzzle. But even beyond that, remember, you have 3 different mission sets. So like now that I've successfully completed the first set of tasks on Winora, I'm really excited to go and play the other 2 sets of missions. And then once I finish that, I've got 5 more boxes, each with 3 sets of missions. So that is 18 kind of variants on the game, 3 different sets of missions within each theme. So 18 variants on the game, but 3 of them are built around an ice planet. 3 of them are built around a spore planet. 3 of them may be built around a fire planet, and they've got more planets coming. So if you like to play cooperative games like this, but you kind of get tired because over time you're just playing the same game and there's some variability in it, but you play it enough, it becomes very samey. This game offers you, if you back everything, if you got everything in the first Kickstarter, 18 different variants. And more to come. So even if you buy it at retail, you can pick up, a planet box, try it out. If you like it, you can kind of just get them one at a time, whatever suits your needs. But I think for me, this is one of the best collaborative games out there, the best cooperative games. And it's so well designed. The components are so thoughtfully made, so well made. And the game tray system works so well with it to get it set up, to take it away. There really is only that initial crunch in understanding all of the different game systems and how they fit together. But once you go through and you, I think, play it once or twice, you'll have a good handle on it, and those basics will be taken into every variant of the game you play, every different planet, the different missions on the different planets. So there is a kind of a front load of information in learning the game, but once you do that, you're good to go, and it is just a wonderful cooperative experience. I'd recommend it to anyone who likes cooperative games, especially heavy cooperative games. So this game gets a 9.0 from me, Unsettled. I hope to be coming back to it soon. I need to teach some more people how to play the game and then play some more planets and things like that. And I'll let you know if my feelings about the game as I play more planets remain as strong or perhaps become even more strong. Or if I think that, maybe the planets are samey once you go from planet to planet. I haven't played the other planets yet. I've just played Winora. I've just played the one mission on Winora. But I see how it should be very different. It should be very variable. And as long as they've done a good job with it, and they've done a good job with everything else, including the production and just the general design, I have no reason to think that those other planets with that variability that's kind of purposely been built into them won't be variable in the actual play of the game. So Unsettled gets a 9.0 from me, a very high recommendation, and I hope to talk about it more in the future. Okay, so just to sum up, because I did talk about 10 different games today, just to sum up the ratings, 7 Wonders Duel is going to get an 8.0 for me. 7 Wonders Duel Pantheon is going to get an 8.0. 7 Wonders Duel Agora is going to get a 7.0. Caper Europe maintains its score of an 8.5. Cascadia, which I'm talking about for the first time, also I'm giving it an 8.5. The Isle of Cats, which I've played before a bunch of times, but I'm talking about for the first time here, maintains its score of 8.5, and that is a game that, like Lost Ruins of Arnak and Wingspan, is a game I think can be enjoyed by all levels of gamers. And it's just a joyful experience, as is the other two, that I think is a good meeting ground for all levels of gamers. Lost Ruins of Arnak, which I've played 5 times this period, I'm bumping up my score to a 9.0, just in terms of how consistently good it's been. Lost Seas, which I played twice, and I like the puzzle of, but it's not really my game. I'm coming in with a 7.0 for that. Paint the Roses, which I also really enjoy, and I enjoy the puzzle of it. I think I enjoy it a little bit less than Lost Seas. So even though the UI issues are no longer an issue, or at least I understand them now, so they're not an issue for me, and hopefully if you're watching this, they won't be an issue for you. Paint the Roses for me is going to get a 6.0. Potion Explosion, which I think is just such a joyful experience, very tactile and fun, gets a 7.5. Wingspan, which I have talked about in the past, I've played it a couple of times this period, maintains its score of 8.5, and the only thing for me that's holding it back from being a little bit higher is the fact that the probability of getting the cards you need. And sometimes even when you try to play into that, you can't quite get there and get the cards that you need. But other than that, a wonderful game, a wonderful engine builder, and something that really does appeal to gamers of all levels, and I think offers lots of great choices. And then finally, Unsettled, which is one of my favorite heavy cooperative games ever. It's produced on such a high level, it's designed on such a high level, and I don't think I actually mentioned this talking about it previously, but it's so well written. It's got such a cleverness about it. And while it's science fiction themed and space themed, it's not really about fighting other aliens, blowing things up. It's about science, and it's about how you work together. And within that, there can be crazy death and danger and things like that. But there is such a sense of humor behind the design and the writing on the cards and the presentation of the information that is just, it's so fun to play. It's the kind of game that you can play and lose and just have a rollicking good time anyway. But it's so well made and the puzzle is so good that it's a game that I want to keep coming back to and trying to beat. It's not a game where I lose and I feel defeated in any way. It's a game that makes me want to play it more and beat it more. And I'm not only playing it to win and sort of, not having a good time, just wanting to win. It's a game that I enjoy playing win or lose. And I think that speaks so much just to the design of it across multiple levels. So 9.0 for Unsettled from me. Okay, so the first campaign that I wanted to talk to you about today is for a game called Maple Valley. It's going to be completing its funding on Thursday, December the 8th. This one had a minimum required funding goal of $29,000. They're currently at $273,000, which is about 9 times that minimum required funding goal. It's a game for 1 to 5 players that plays in about 45 to 75 minutes. The complexity is light, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at medium-low. It's a spiritual sequel to a game called Creature Comforts that came out a year or two ago, was very much loved. It's got hand management, set collection, and it also features very cute animal-themed cards and animal meeples. It's designed by Roberta Taylor, who did Creature Comforts, Octopus's Garden, and Sherwood Showdown. It's got art from Shauna J.C. Tenney, who did Bugs on Rugs, Creature Comforts, and Wizards of the Wild, and it's published by Kids Table BG, who have put out Creature Comforts, Fauxzilla, and Wreck Raiders. Now in this campaign, for $54, you can pledge the Kickstarter edition, and how that is different from the eventual retail edition is extra cards that you'll get at retail, wooden resources and player markers. So in the retail version, it'll eventually be cardboard, and a game trays system, which won't exist in the retail version. So if you like this kind of game, if you like this thing, if you really like Creature Comforts, maybe you want to go in, pledge it on Kickstarter, get the nicer Kickstarter version with all those things. Now for $113, you can pledge the Comforts and Valley Kickstarter editions. That will get you not only the Kickstarter edition of this new game Maple Valley, but also the Kickstarter edition of Creature Comforts. And from there, we've got some add-ons to talk about. So if you want to pledge for additional copies of the Kickstarter version of Maple Valley, you can do that for $54 each. For $19, you can get the Maple Valley Wood Bits. For $60, you can add on the Creature Comforts Kickstarter edition. For $19, you can add on the Creature Comforts Wood Bits, and this might be something that you want to do if, let's say, you bought it at retail previously, and now through this campaign, let's say you're pledging Maple Valley, you want to upgrade your previous retail version of Creature Comforts into a Kickstarter edition. You could add on the things that you're missing, one of which would be the Wood Bits. For $4, you can add on the Creature Comforts mini expansions. There's 2 of them. And for $150, you can add on the Creature Comforts Dice Tower promo cards. Now in the continental US, your shipping is estimated at either $13 or $17, depending on which of the 2 pledges you're pledging at. And then if you get additional games, big games that you add on, it's going to be $4 additional for each game. Finally, Kids Table BG is planning on delivering Maple Valley in December of 2023. From there, we move on to a game called Tiny Epic Crimes, which is also going to complete its funding on Thursday, December the 8th. This is a game that had a minimum required funding goal of $15,000. They're currently at $295,000, which is the richest campaign of the video, and that sets them up for a 20-time multiplier on that minimum required funding goal. This is a game for 1 to 4 players that plays in about 30 to 60 minutes. Complexity on the game is medium light, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at medium low. Now, this is a mafia-themed deduction game in the Tiny Epic series. It can be played either cooperatively or competitively. Like all of those games, it's designed by Scott Almes. He's best known for Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, Tiny Epic Dinosaurs, Tiny Epic Galaxies, Tiny Epic Quest, and Warp's Edge. And the art here is by Nicoletta Vossi, who's previously worked with Scott on Tiny Epic Dinosaurs, Tiny Epic Dungeons, and Tiny Epic Pirates. The publisher here is Gamelin Games. They've published all of the Tiny Epic games. I believe they're Scott's company. They've also published Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, and along with that, Tiny Epic Dinosaurs, Tiny Epic Galaxies, and Tiny Epic Quest. Now for $20, you can pledge for a premium print-and-play version, or for $25, you can pledge for the base game. For $30, you can get the deluxe game, and that will include the print and play. So that's what makes it deluxe. It is the base game plus the print and play version. For $40, you can pledge the deluxe bundle, and that is going to add on the Kingpins expansion. Now, shipping in the continental US is being estimated at $9 or $11. You've got 4 different pledges there, but remember, the first one's a print and play, so that's not going to have shipping associated with it. And then the second one's the base game. The third pledge is the base game with the print and play, so that won't actually increase the shipping, so that remains a $9 shipping estimate. And then the $11 is for the deluxe bundle that also includes that Kingpins expansion. Finally, Gamelin Games is planning to deliver Tiny Epic Crimes in July of 2023. And from there we move to our final campaign of the video. It's for a game called Fit to Print. Fit to Print is going to complete its funding on Friday, December 9th. This one had a minimum required funding goal of $8,000. They're currently at $179,000, which is 22 times that minimum required funding goal. That makes it the highest multiplier of the week, meaning they've done that many times more business over what they said is the minimum to be able to produce the project. This is a game for 1 to 6 players, plays in about 15 to 30 minutes. Complexity on the game is light, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign again at medium-low. We've had several campaigns we're talking about this week, all from very reputable publishers that have done a bunch of Kickstarters, and so these are all things that you should feel fairly confident backing. Now, this is a tile placement game. You're going to be putting together newspaper headlines. It's done in real time, though. I know that's an issue for some people, including me. I think I'm probably going to back this one anyway, though, because I hear for people who don't like real-time games, this is a very good place to start, or this is one that you may like. It's also from Flat Out Games, who have previously published Cascadia, which I talked about in the first section of this video, Calico, Verdant, and every one of those games is just a great hit, I think. Every one of them is done so well, and they're these great little puzzly tile placement games, and I see no reason that this one shouldn't be more of the same. They're just on a really good track right now with a stellar track record. Fit to Print is designed by Peter McPherson, who people may know from Tiny Towns. He's also worked on a game called Wormholes, and it's got art from Ian O'Toole. And this is another huge selling point for me because I love Ian O'Toole. He's one of my favorite artists. He's probably best known for The Gallerist, Kanban EV, Lisboa, On Mars, and Venus Deluxe Edition. Finally, it's being published by Flat Out Games. And right now, their highest rated games are Calico, Cascadia, and 10. Verdant hasn't really been out long enough to rise up the ranks to make it into the top 1,000 on BGG, which is I only count games in the top 1,000 at BGG. But I think it'll get there. It's a fantastic game as well. Now, for $5, you can pledge the print and play version of the game. And for $29, you can pledge the Kickstarter edition. Like a lot of the other campaigns I've been talking about this week, it's not too expensive and there aren't too many options. There are pledge levels that include multiple copies. So I usually don't cover those as well, but if for some reason, you had a lot of friends or you wanted to give them away as gifts, there are a few higher pledge levels that just include multiple copies, but nothing more than that. They're not adding anything else in gameplay-wise. You're just getting multiple copies of the same game. For the Kickstarter edition, continental shipping in the US has been estimated at $13. And Flat Out Games is planning on delivering Fit to Print in October of 2023. So that wraps the currently running campaign section for the week. Stick around a little bit longer and I'll tell you which games I pledged from last week's video and which games I've acquired into my collection this period. And these are the games that are really good to let me know in the comments below if they're things that you're really interested in and whether you'd like to have teach videos made or reviews where you can hear more about what I think about these games. Okay, so I backed 3 things from last week. Last week was a huge week. There are so many things I wanted to back. Like 8 games that I wanted to back, but I narrowed it down and I just backed 3. So we have Castles of Mad King Ludwig Renovations, which is the newest expansion. Castles of Mad King Ludwig is one of those games, again, that I think everyone can enjoy. It appeals to all levels of gamer. You're building out this castle. I've played it in the past. You're building out this castle, this kind of floor plan of a castle, and based on what rooms you build will determine how you score. So as you're playing it, you're kind of building a scoring engine, and that will determine how you want to continue building it. So they did a campaign a little while back for like a really nice version of the game, the most pimped out version of the game that's been made. Just great. And included in that was a colossal version with bigger tiles. Now, some people may like that. For me, it just felt like if you're playing this game with people and they're all building this tableau on the table, the colossal tiles may make it a little too big to be functional. But for people who like that, it was available. So for this campaign, they were offering both renovations in the regular tile size and in the colossal tile size, so that if you did back the colossal version earlier, which I did not, you could get the colossal renovations to match. They did not, however, include a way to get the colossal version of the game. So if you wanted to do that, you just had to go through the publisher's website. So you kind of couldn't go all in on the colossal version at this point in time. But if you had in the past, you could get the colossal version of the Renovations. Now, what the Renovations are is a new sort of mechanic in the game where you can build over certain rooms. And I think if you've played this game in the past, you know that as I described it, you're creating an engine as you go. And sometimes you do that really well. And sometimes you have a couple rooms that are just really in your way and not working out for you. So this would give you the ability to build over those rooms and help maximize your scoring. Just sort of a new mechanic and some new tiles. And as someone who did back that previous version of Mad King Ludwig previously and really enjoys it, I wanted to get the new expansion for it. I also backed Ocean's Legends of the Deep. I wanted to back Oceans originally, and I played an Evolution game once in the past. I do not own any, but I like upgrading things and Evolution and building things and engine builders. So with this new expansion for Ocean's Legends of the Deep, this just seemed like a great time for me to jump on and just get all of it. And I think I do want to play Evolution, but I think as the Evolution series of games go, Oceans looks like the best one to me. I hear the most good things about it. So this is just a really good time for me to jump in and get the whole package. And finally, I backed Werewolf the Apocalypse Retaliation. This wasn't a game that I had originally planned on backing, but the more I investigated the campaign and the more I looked into the previous game in the series, Vampire the Masquerade, I think it was Chapters was the one that they did, I really liked everything about this game, the miniatures and the storyline and the gameplay. So I'm really excited for this game. It's not delivering for a while yet, but it's a game that I think will be really fun to feature eventually on Twitch, on the streaming channel. And it just does things a little bit differently than a lot of other games in my collection. And the more and more I back things, the more I'm looking for things when I do continue to back something that are a little bit different. So I'm really fascinated and interested in this one, and I'm hoping to get it played, on Twitch for everyone to enjoy eventually. Now, in terms of what I acquired in my collection that arrived this period, previously I talked about how I did back the latest season of Cthulhu Death May Die. So I did go and I ordered, the original game and Yog-Sothoth. That was all I was able to get. There's also a season 2 out there, and there's Black Goat of the Woods. Those things have in the past been available through retail channels. I hope to get them eventually, but they've been out of stock everywhere. I like Cthulhu themed things. I like dungeon crawlers, and I've heard so many good things about this game. It's something I'm really looking forward to playing, and again, hopefully featuring on Twitch once we eventually get that channel up and running. I also acquired Lacrimosa, which is sort of a music-themed game. I can't remember if it's Beethoven or not, but if you look at the player boards and things, there's all this stuff that has to do with sheet music. I used to play piano back in the day. I was actually pretty good at it. Eventually, I kind of gave it up to do other things, but music is still in my blood, and it's a very heavy game, and it appealed to me on multiple levels. It was also something a friend of mine I know really wants to play. She's a piano player as well, so it seemed like a really good thing to get, and it's also a game that is definitely in the conversation as one of the best games of 2022, so it's a game that I feel like I needed to play and evaluate. So I'm really looking forward to getting that one played. I've talked about in the past how I've been enjoying this lighter cooperative game called The Loop. There were 2 new expansions that came out for that one, The Revenge of Fauxzilla, and a very recently published one called The Fur Brigade. They gave you new missions to play, new characters you could play at. I picked up both of those expansions. There's also a game I have called Origins, designed by Adam Kopinski, who did Nemesis. This one's a sort of heavy Euro game. I've played it. I've really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it more than its ratings that it's gotten. And so there was this little expansion for it called Ancient Builders. I picked that one up, and I'm curious to throw that into the game. It doesn't offer a lot of things. I think it's just to give you more variability so that if you're playing Origins a lot and you're kind of running it into the ground, it'll breathe some new life into it. It has some new scoring possibilities in it. So I just want to play Origins more in general, and then eventually I'll have that to add into the game. And finally, I picked up a game called The Wolves, which is a new Pandasaurus game. You are literally playing packs of wolves. It's kind of an engine building game. It looked intriguing to me, fairly well produced. I also thought it was the kind of game that might really appeal to Kristen, so I kind of bought it partly with her in mind. So hopefully I'll get to play that one soon and talk about it and what I think about it. I'm not really sure if that's a game that'll stick around in my collection or not. It was just, I think, something to fill out my cart and something that I thought Kristen might enjoy. So I kind of just took a chance on it. Thank you very much again for watching and spending some time with me. I will be back in less than a week with a new video looking at the Kickstarter projects completing funding next week. I'll have some more games that I've played to talk about and probably some more things that I've backed and some more new arrivals. I know of the games that I profiled this week, I think I'm not 100% sure, but I think I'm backing one. You probably already know that if you watched the whole video. Feel free to conjecture below, but you'll know for certain if you come back next week and I reveal what I did back. And I do have a lot of new stuff coming in as well. A lot of Kickstarter projects, some retail games. So next week I'll be talking about what else showed up, and then you can let me know which of those things you're most interested in having teach and reviews produced for. So until the next time, have a great week. Play lots of great games. I will too. And I'll see you very, very soon. Take care.